Hey y'all, it's K-Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. Welcome back. Hey, I'm your host, K-Bird Tweets. How's it going? We're back here at Peace, Love, and Baseball, and baseball. Baseball is back. Baseball things are happening. There are games to be played in Major League Baseball. Their spring training games start this week. So we've had some fun the last couple of weeks with our Super Bowl entertainment episode and our Valentine's Day feature on Battery Mates with Jonna and Susie. But it's time to get back to business with our team feature episodes and our opening segment this week in Peace, Love, and Baseball. So this week in Peace, Love, and Baseball, I want to start out by talking to you about an experience that I had at a restaurant last night in the city of Chicago, where I currently reside. And this is the second time that I've been to this restaurant. So I think maybe I mentioned it a little bit when I went last time at the end of August, but I'm not sure. I may have just talked about it on another podcast that I was on. So if you've heard me talk about Warlord before, we're going to talk about it a little bit more again, but certainly from a different perspective than maybe I gave you the first time. But quite honestly, this is one of the only restaurants that I have gone to more than once in Chicago. And it certainly says something that I went to it more than once, considering that we had to wait in line for about 15 minutes to put our name in. And then we had to wait, I think about an hour, maybe hour and a half. We were told it would be an hour and a half to 2 hours, but it was certainly more like an hour that we waited to actually get a table because they do not take reservations. And they're only open Friday through Monday. That being said, I mention that because it seems like such an inconvenience. It's certainly like a choice that you're going to make to go out of your way to go to some place like that. But it's so worth it that I literally, like, I'm saying that out loud now. And I'm like, that sounds like it should be like not a thing that I'd be particularly into, especially because I had my mom visiting and we wanted to take her. But it's totally worth it. And I'm going to tell you why. So we went to this restaurant called Warlord. And if you have watched the TV show The Bear or the movie The Menu, which I have certainly talked about in past episodes months and months ago on Peace, Love, and Baseball, this is that kind of a restaurant. It is fine dining. It is expert service, at the next level. It is, I would say it is certainly going to be at some point at least Michelin recommended, could perhaps get a Michelin star or two. And I don't know a ton about the fine dining world or what Michelin stars even really mean, but look that up. If it does mean something to you or you've been to a Michelin star restaurant, the number one thing that you're thinking is, wow, that sounds really expensive. And there are people that for certain Michelin star restaurants will save for years and like get on wait lists for years to go to these types of restaurants. It is not that expensive. I would not have been there if it was. It's certainly, pricier than going to your neighborhood Applebee's or Chili's. But if you're going to go out for a nice dinner in the city of Chicago, you're going to pay very relative price to what we paid to have this just completely next level experience. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today. And believe me, it is going to play into baseball. So stick with me here. As always, I'm going to bring it back. So Warlord, this restaurant in the Avondale neighborhood of Chicago, it has been open for about 9 months. They have not done any press or like formal interviews or coverage of the restaurant. And a big part of that is because seemingly they want it to stay a neighborhood place. It's not in downtown Chicago. It's in one of the like northwest, more neighborhoody neighborhoods of Chicago. It's not a super expensive area to live in, but it is nice and safe and family oriented. And that's what they want it to be. They want it to be a family, friends. I wouldn't say it's like super kid friendly by any means. just because quite honestly, it's going to be somewhere that you're going to want to go and take in the whole experience on your own. And it is, fancier specific types of food. Their menu is different literally every day based on what they have because it's all sourced, locally sourced and preserved, and they use what they have. So a lot of times it's a different variation on the same types of foods or flavors over the weekend. And then next weekend, it's like, what have we got now to use? And it's a different variety of variations off of something entirely different. But yeah, because it is like this neighborhood spot, it's more relaxed and, you don't feel like you have to dress up or, feel particularly formal to be there, which is something that I love about it. But here's the thing I really want to get to. It is not just about great food. It is about the experience. It's about how you feel when you are there. As I mentioned, the atmosphere is relaxed, yet everyone is so attentive and you don't wait an extra moment. Even you're never thinking like, oh, I hope my drink comes soon, or I'd really like some more water, because you don't even have the opportunity to think of it. It's already happened. Everything from the lighting to the wallpaper to the smell is perfectly curated to create vibes galore. And we're big on vibes here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. And to create that experience that you have from the moment that you walk in. The concept started from 3 fine dining chefs who wanted to focus on preservation, fire, family, and friendship. And there are people from all ages at this restaurant, all walks of life, dressed in all different things. Personally, the first time I went was in August. So I was wearing like jeans and a button down short sleeve shirt. And like last night I wore a cute sweater, nothing fancy, felt so comfy and never thought twice about it. The atmosphere is also created by things, not only like I mentioned, like lighting, music, candles, the aesthetic, but it is also hugely created by the energy and the employees and the way that they read the room, the way they read the tables, read the situation. Sometimes when you go to a restaurant and the server can be perfectly nice, absolutely nothing wrong with them. You're like, I wouldn't tell you to do anything different, but like, it's still kind of awkward because every time they come, they're like kind of interrupting the conversation, or you know what I mean? We've all had that experience where we're like, there's nothing, like, you're being perfectly nice. You're being very attentive. Like, I don't know what I would complain about per se, but it's still like a little awkward. The people that work at a place like Warlord I don't even know how else to describe it other than they are people. And they have this this natural discretion that is a skill. And it really matters. It really matters in creating the environment. And it's not something that is super easy to teach, I would think. At least in my experience, it's not. But they also create an environment as coworkers that allows them all to operate at a high level with the same level of expectations and service from each other. But everyone is relaxed because they trust each other and they're all just doing the thing that they have been assigned to do and that they are good at. There is an understanding of the expectation and level of trust that is going to be executed. Imagine if we all had that kind of a workplace where you never felt like anybody was breathing down your neck, or it just takes the stress away when the understanding is we're all here to do our best and to get paid well enough to do what we're being asked to do, to get paid appropriately for our time and our efforts. They also don't overwork their employees. We actually had one server who, we poked and prodded a bit, but she told us that she used to work at another very exclusive Michelin star restaurant in Chicago. I won't mention the name of it, but she said that she works half as many hours at Warlord and she makes the same amount of money at Warlord as she did working twice as many hours at this like very high-end place that certainly brings in a lot more money than this place, that is new, that is not overcharging for anything. In fact, I was like, please charge me twice as much as you just did for this meal, because it was worth it. And it literally could have been twice as much and I would not have batted an eye. I mean, I would have, because I would have been like, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that, Kelsey, but I wouldn't have batted an eye in the sense of I would have felt that it was worth it. And that is saying a lot. So it got me thinking about creating the environment that you want to be in, and that there are so many ways that we can take control of our environment. And I think it's easy to kind of take for granted, whether you are at home, in the office, whether you're in your car, take control of what you can. There's a lot of us that I'm sure can relate to that feeling when you've cleaned your house and everything is just like in its place and the dishes are done, the laundry is folded, like everything smells good, just, the sunlight is coming in and you don't see any dust bunnies and it just feels really good. It's that kind of thing, but on literally every level. Anything that plays into, especially like our five senses. How do you feel in your chair that you work in? What do you smell when you're falling asleep at night? All of these things are playing into how your central nervous system and how your body is processing your life and every moment. And it really has this huge overall effect on your life, on your day, and on how you show up. So, I won't get too into the nitty gritty, but you know what I'm saying? Those little things, everything, again, from the lighting to the sounds to the smells, that a lot of times we can make little adjustments to. I mean, think about like if you have a long commute and you had to spend a good amount of time in your car, just what little ways you can make yourself more comfortable or make it a place that put you in a good headspace. And you can be in control of a lot of things, even if you can't be in control of the fact that you have a long commute and you have to be in your car. And again, this takes me down the road of a big conversation that we're hearing, especially as teams start to get together and gather for spring training, is that team culture and environment matters. We are hearing this a lot around teams like the St. Louis Cardinals, which clearly I'm here for, but not just them. Clearly, it is something that matters, and it is reevaluated. It's reworked the same way as any kind of roster reconstruction is when things don't come together for a team. And I was already thinking about this and wanting to talk about this today because obviously it's been a huge narrative of the Cardinals offseason, of the Chicago White Sox are another one that, I mean, on a totally different level, are certainly committed to a cultural rebuild. And, all kinds of conversations about how teams like the Orioles, it's not just the talent that makes them so great, but the dynamic and the engagement between the players, all that kinds of stuff. We hear it out of every single organization. It is a storyline one way or the other that evolves always, right? The Cardinals are generally like looked at least overall in my lifetime, as like a strong culture and a place that players want to be. And so maybe that's a part of it being such a point of conversation right now, but you hear it, all fan bases are hearing it the same way. And I got to thinking about it even more when Miles Mikolas, starting pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, he was on Foul Territory today, and he was speaking about how he mentioned specifically, the whole interview was great. So go back and check it out. It is on the Monday, February 19th episode of Foul Territory. Michaelis did a great interview with the guys, but he specifically mentioned about how young team members like were on their phones a lot and stuff in the clubhouse. And that was just one, point of conversation that he addressed when they were talking about like, how has the environment changed? Like, what is it about not having Wayne right there that, and Yachty and Albert that has like really changed things. But even just thinking about like the kind of environment that creates when you have a lot of 22 to 25-year-olds who are like on their phones all the time and using social media in a different way. And just the kind of difference in environment that creates the experience that you're having day in and day out and the kind of relationships that you're building. And that experience absolutely translates into the work that you are all doing together, whether it is on the baseball field or it is in a fine dining restaurant. So he even mentioned things like how having the ping pong table back in the clubhouse, which was something that we all heard about as Cardinals fans, like halfway through last season, how something like that creates more of an engaging environment. This is a very, surface level example, but it's a perfect example, and it played right in to the theme of this week in Peace, Love, and Baseball. So I wanted to tell you about it. Anyway, I'll throw the link to that episode of Foul Territory in the show notes here so you can go check it out if you'd like. Because it is time now to get back down to business with our team feature for this week. And our team this week on Peace, Love, and Baseball is the Cleveland Guardians. So we're going to switch things up just a little bit. And we are going to hear first from our tried and true resident Guardians fan. Alyssa is here with a one-on-one interview to give us the scoop. And then I'll come back. I'll give you some hard research on the Guardians. And we will wrap up the episode hearing from Quincy Wheeler, who is a writer and podcaster covering the team. So with no further ado, let's get in on the Guardians' good stuff with Alyssa. So today on Peace, Love, and Baseball, we are diving into the Cleveland Guardians franchise and their fandom. And what better way to learn a little bit more about the Guardians and their fans than talking to a die-hard herself. So we have Alyssa, who is joining us today. Alyssa, thank you so much for taking some time to hang out with me and helping our fans gain some insight into the Cleveland Guardians. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. I think we're both like keeping warm as best we can here in the Midwest. And we talked about how, we're counting down the days till spring training at this point, but you actually got to go to Fancast in Guardians country yesterday. How was that? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So they have a lot of different activities and booths for different local companies. Our Lake Erie captains, or Lake County captains, rather. Yeah. They're our high A team. They had a booth there. So I love them. It was nice connecting with them. For the players, they have different autograph and photo sessions. And they also had some players walking around, so it's really easy to go up and meet them, which is really cool. So I got to meet my favorite player again. So it was really nice being able to actually connect with the players, and you actually felt like you were part of something.
Yeah, for sure. You're like, oh yeah, you are just a person too. Who is your favorite player?
Eli Morgan. He's one of our relief pitchers.
Awesome. Oh, my dogs are going crazy all day today. It's because it's freezing and they can't get outside as much as they would like to. So that keeps happening. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Obviously, you're a diehard Guardians fan, but how did you become a fan of the Cleveland Guardians?
Yeah, so I'm from Cleveland, so I'm a born and raised Cleveland fan, and my whole family is made up of Cleveland fans. But with the Guardians specifically, my grandma has always loved Cleveland baseball, and she's the one who really got me into it.
That's awesome. It's not a dad thing. It's a grandma thing.
Yeah.
My grandma was actually really into baseball too. She was a Chicago Cubs fan though. So I did get my love of baseball from her, but not my fandom from her.
Yeah, yesterday we took her to Guards Fest, and that was her first time, and she loves Josh Naylor.
Yeah.
And he was reading a book to kids, and she sat in the second row and got to listen to him. It was amazing to watch.
Oh, that is so cool. Oh my gosh, that just melts my heart thinking about it. Okay, so I want to ask you, what is something special about the Guardians that stands out to you that you think maybe baseball fans of other teams or who don't follow the Guardians, they might not know about them?
Yeah, so we're a very young and fun team. And I know it's hard to look at that coming off of a disappointing season, but most fans wouldn't know just how nice and fun our players are. They're really great guys, great representatives of the city, and they're all really easy to root for as individuals. And then also the camaraderie and the fun that they have in the clubhouse is very clear. I know there's some controversy because we haven't done much in this off season, but we got Austin Hedges back, and he's a big vibes guy, and I think it's been good for the clubhouse. And then they turn that camaraderie and fun right back to the fans. And I think we really saw that at Guards Fest, just how personable that was. And all the players are very nice guys, and they create a very welcome environment for us fans. So it feels really nice to be like a part of a team that's really young and fun and very fan oriented.
Yeah, we are big on vibes here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. So I could not agree more that is very important. And the next couple questions I'm going to ask you are going to kind of dive a little bit more into that culture specifically and how maybe the players will tell us about that. So we know, there's Shane Bieber, there's Steven Kwan, there's Jose Ramirez. We know those guys, but who is a current player in the Guardian system that you are excited about that maybe us outside of the fan base haven't heard much about yet?
Yeah, one of my favorite prospects is our 2022 first round pick. It's Chase DeLauder. He's a right fielder. He played in high A this season or past season, and he's a right fielder. And one of our struggles within our organization, at least in the majors right now, is finding that solid center or right fielder. So he would fill a hole that we have and need in our organization. But I also got to watch him when he was playing at Lake County. So it was really fun to watch him while he was there, knowing that he's most likely going to be one of our big stars, hopefully by the end of this season.
Yeah, that's something else that is pretty unique, I guess, to the Guardians that I didn't really think about is the Lake County Captains are the single A team, right?
Yeah, they're a high A team.
And they're pretty close to Progressive Field. What is it, like a half hour or so away?
Yeah, what I didn't realize is how unusual that is because our AAA is about 2 hours away in Columbus. Our AA is in Akron, so that's about 45 minutes. And then my drive to Lake County is about 40 minutes. So they're all right in the area. So it's really cool to be able to easily get to our minor league teams and be able to experience that.
That is really neat. And I think that in itself helps the fan base be more invested in the organization from the bottom up because you can go watch those players play. Like I'm just thinking about the Cardinals, like their single A team is like 3.5 hours away and their AA team is at least a couple hours. Same with the AAA. So yeah, it's a way to get more buy-in. And especially right now, when you do have this young team to be excited about, you can look further than just who's currently on the field at Progressive Field. So that's a great point. Okay, I'm interested to see what you say here because as a young team, there are plenty of players that I'm sure you wish the Guardians had on their team. But if you could pick one player who is currently a Major League Baseball player, not on the Guardians, that you think just fits into the culture, you look at this guy and you're like, he is a Cleveland Guardian. He should be on the field. Does not have to fill a current need for the team. So put that out of your minds. Like he's not taking anybody's place. But he should just be a Guardian. Who would it be?
So we definitely do not need any more middle infielders or utility players, but I'm going with former Guardian Ernie Clement. He was one of my favorites when he was here, still one of my favorites with the Blue Jays, but he's a big vibes guy. He's really fun to watch with his versatility, but he's also very interactive with fans, which is very nice to see.
Ooh, okay, awesome. I'm going to have to keep an eye on him on the Blue Jays now.
He's also a Bills fan, and so am I, like Erie solidarity, so there's that too.
Okay, cool. How do you feel, let me ask you this real quick, are you excited about Bo Naylor getting the starting job at catcher this upcoming season?
Oh, for sure. It's been so fun watching him play with Josh, and I think that they make each other better players. So I'm excited to see a full year with him because he was called up in June, and then he really got going in July and August. So I can't wait to see what the season brings for both him and Josh.
Yeah, that might be something that fans outside of your fan base do not know either, because I was floored when I saw, I was like, Naylor. There is a Naylor on the Guardians. I know Josh Naylor. Wait, there's another one. And the fact that they're both on the same team is just crazy. And then they have another brother who plays too in the A's organization. But yeah, how cool that they're both in the Guardian system. They're both going to play on the Major League team this year. Speaking of the team, I guess this upcoming season, is there anyone that's been I know there's a lot of trade talks around the Guardians because they do have a lot of potential moving pieces. Is there anybody that you've heard trade talks of that you're like, please do not trade this guy?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of rumors about Shane Bieber and Emmanuel Clase. I think Shane Bieber's under one more year of control by us, and we signed Clase to an extension the beginning of the 22 season. And both have been very solid parts of our team. They're like part of the image when you think of the Guardians. They're some of our big players. And Clase has been an amazing closer. He had the most saves last season, although he gave up a lot of saves. But I think that was because we didn't have a lot of offense. So we had a lot of close games. So it was like kind of hard to hold on to leads sometimes. And then Shane Bieber has been our ace for the past several seasons. And we at least have Tanner Bybee, Logan Allen, Gavin Williams stepping up, and hopefully a healthy Tristan McKenzie. But it'd be weird to see Shane Bieber in another uniform, and it would feel weird to give up our amazing closer.
Yeah. Shane Bieber is like the first player that comes to mind when I think of the Guardians, and it's been weird to even see him in trade talks. I'm like, he's a Guardian, but
I know the worst one is seeing the rumors with the Cubs, and I'm like, I don't want to see either of them in a Cubs uniform.
Yeah. Okay, this is a kind of a good perspective from other fan bases as well. I think when you're not a fan of the team, we have a different idea of like who their biggest rivals are. Who are like the one or two teams that you would say are like the biggest rivals of the Guardians? Like when this team comes to town, the stadium's sold out, there's just like that next level of excitement. Who are their biggest rivals right now?
Always the Yankees, and I enjoy going to those games. The last game I went to, we did win. And then the Twins, which are division rivals, those are always like very high energy games.
I loved watching the Guardians Yankees postseason games a year or so ago. That I was like rooting for the Guardians so hard. And that probably made that. Is that, you think that's a big part of the reason why they are more rivals right now?
I think that the postseason in 22, but also when Miles Strauss scaled the wall to defend Stephen Kwan.
Yeah, Stephen Kwan is a really exciting, fun player to watch over there as well. There's certain players, like depending on their organization, I feel like they get less airtime or, just less hype around them because they're with a team that maybe hasn't had a lot of postseason action or, isn't the Los Angeles Dodgers right now. So the Guardians have a lot of those players that I think are really fun to watch and get invested in, but maybe are not necessarily in all the headlines right now.
Yeah,
so
I think Tanner Bybee for sure deserves a lot more hype. He was the runner-up in AL Rookie of the Year last season, and he came up when we had pitcher injuries and just fit right in, and I think he's our future ace, if he's not already.
Yeah, love that. Another good one to keep our eye on. The other big thing to note about the Guardians coming into the 2024 season is that they have a new manager, obviously Tito Francona, who was very much the face of the franchise and an iconic leader, has retired, stepped down, and you've got Stephen Vogt coming in. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like he's a good fit?
I do. There are a lot of names thrown out there for potential managers, and he was actually my favorite. And one of the reasons was because of his youth. And I feel like, he could have a long career with us, but he also isn't that far removed from actually playing in the game. And he does have experience because he was the bullpen coach with the Seattle Mariners.
Mm-hmm.
But he also reminds me of Austin Hedges. And I felt there sometimes last season because we lost a lot of games. We had a losing record, which wasn't fun, where it just felt like our team was like kind of tired of losing. It's like, what do we have to do? And I feel like the vibes are like a big part. Like having fun, I think, can go a long way. And I thought it was funny. His first move as the manager was to go and get Austin Hedges back.
There you go. It definitely sets the tone. I could not agree more that energy makes a big difference. And I think it's going to be really interesting. Like, he is a catcher, and having all that young, exciting pitching in the Guardians organization, I think it'll be really interesting to see how he specifically works to develop them as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I know last season we had the world's iffiest catching situation. Even when Bo Naylor was up here, it was extremely frustrating. Boston had just played a big role in developing a lot of the pitchers that we have on the team now. And he's willing to be like a mentor to Bo Naylor. So that's going to be really fun to watch. And then also having Sandy Alomar and Stephen Vogt.
Yeah, definitely set up to be ones to watch overall in 2024. Well, we have a lot of listeners who are maybe not like diehard baseball fans, or we have a lot of overseas listeners as well who maybe they've gotten really into the game of baseball, but they haven't really declared their fandom yet. So if you were going to sell a new baseball fan or somebody who's maybe looking to find a new team to get excited about on being a fan of the Guardians, I'm not going to give you a hard clock here, but give me about a 60-second elevator pitch on why we should root for the Cleveland Guardians.
Yeah, so of course, every fan wants one thing for the Guardians, and that's a World Series ring. And most of us have never experienced that because our last win was 76 years ago. So we're all in the same boat here. And despite coming so close several times, having struggles and experiencing a lot of heartbreak, we still come together every year and we form a tight-knit community to cheer our team on. And I think we have a really supportive group of fans here.
I love that. I do sense that about the Guardians fan base and just the organization as a whole. There are some other teams where it's easy to get down in the dumps about them or just you be really critical of them. But the Guardians is not one of those teams. You don't necessarily look down on them, even though it has been that 76 long years since they've had the ultimate win. But even outside of the fan base, I would not be mad at all to see that happen for the Guardians. And I thank you very much for taking some time out to chat with me about them today and your love for them. But hey, tell us where we can follow you on social media and keep up with your baseball content.
Yeah, I mainly post baseball content on Twitter, and that's at Alyssa216, which I have right here. My Instagram is 216Alyssa because my Twitter name was taken. But I'm hoping to post some baseball content on there this season.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We'll catch up with you later in the season. Let's take a little dive together, why don't we, into the history of the Cleveland Guardians franchise. The franchise actually originated in 1896 as the Columbus Buckeyes, and they were a minor league team based in Columbus, Ohio, which I'm not sure the amount of miles, but from my own personal experience, it's about 2.5 hours from Cleveland. They played in the Western League. The team was renamed the Columbus Senators the following year and then relocated to Grand Rapids, Michigan in the middle of the 1899 season, becoming the Grand Rapids Furniture Makers for the remainder of the season. Is furniture making big in Grand Rapids? It must be. So, yeah, if you were complaining about team names, just remember that this team used to be called the Furniture Makers. No shade to Furniture Makers, just kind of weird. So the team relocated to Cleveland in 1900, and then they were called the Cleveland Lake Shores. The Western League itself was renamed the American League, and at this point it was still a minor league team prior to the 1900 season. When the American League became a major league, American League became a major league. I want to say team, but it's a league. Now it's in the majors. In 1901, Cleveland was one of its 8 charter franchises. They were originally called the Cleveland Bluebirds or Blues. In all of my research on histories of teams, I'm finding more and more that like they changed names a lot or they had like multiple names that they referred to the teams by. And that's just like not a thing anymore. Interesting. This says the team was also unofficially called the Cleveland Broncos in 1902. Like, how are you the Bluebirds? Are you the Blues? Are you the Broncos? Now, in 1903, the team was named the Cleveland Napoleons, or Naps, after their team captain. So they actually named it after someone on the team. Weird. When he left the team in 1914, the club owner, at that time was Charles Summers, requested that the baseball writers help to choose a new name. This is when they chose the Cleveland Indians and declared to be a tribute to the nickname that fans gave to the Cleveland Spiders, which was Cleveland's major league team from 1887 to 1899. So before this team became a thing. It's so interesting that like you would think the Cleveland Spiders used to be the Cleveland Guardians, but no, totally different, separate franchise. The Cleveland Spiders were the major league team just until 1899. But Louis Sockalis, who was a Native American, was playing for that team. And that is how they originally chose the Cleveland Indians. The name stuck and remained in use for more than a century. So even if you're not a baseball fan, you have probably heard of the Cleveland Indians because they just recently changed their name from the Indians to the Guardians in 2022. More on that in a bit. Since the Guardians began playing as a major league team in Cleveland in 1901, they have won 6 American League pennants and 2 World Series titles. The first was in 1920, and the second was in 1948. So out of the teams who have won a World Series, there are 5 major league teams who have never won a title, but out of the teams who have won, the Guardians currently have the longest World Series title drought of 75 years since their last title. So they have not won since that 1948 championship. Between their 1920 World Series win and 1948 win, they did not make an appearance in the World Series for 28 years, but when they did, it was worth the wait. The 1948 Indians were led by shortstop player manager Lou Boudreau, who was the American League's most valuable player that year, one of 5 future Hall of Fame members who were on the team in 1948. The others were outfielder Larry Doby, who was the first African-American to play in the American League, and 3 pitchers, Bob Feller, Bob Lemon, and 42-year-old rookie and former Negro League star Satchel Paige, who was also very famous for being on the St. Louis Stars. So he was part of a St. Louis organization. But at the official age of 42, Satchel Paige became the oldest rookie in Major League Baseball history and the first Black pitcher. Paige ended the year with a 6-1 record. He had a 2.48 ERA and 45 strikeouts, 2 shutouts. Actually, more recently, in July of 2022, in honor of the 75th anniversary of Larry Doby becoming the American League's first Black pitcher, there was a mural added to the exterior of Progressive Field, which is where the Guardians currently play. And there is a mural there now that honors the players who were viewed as barrier breakers that played for the Indians/Guardians. So the mural features Doby, Satchel Paige, and Frank Robinson, who would become the first African-American to manage in the major leagues with the Indians in 1975. Interestingly enough, Frank Robinson has no relation to Jackie Robinson, who we all know was the first African-American to play in the big leagues 28 years prior to the first time there was an African-American manager in the major leagues. The Indians finished the 1948 regular season tied with the Boston Red Sox. They defeated them in the first 1-game playoff in Major League history. Cleveland then beat the Boston Braves in 6 games to win their second World Series title. The Boston Braves that we now know became the Atlanta Braves. From our previous team feature episode. Look, we're tying it all together here. The Indians won 111 games in 1954, but they were swept by the New York Giants in a World Series. This is the series that gives us one of baseball's most iconic pictures of Willie Mays, the over-the-shoulder catch of Vic Wert's towering drive to deep center field in the first game of that World Series. The Indians finished with a losing record in 27 of the next 34 seasons between 1960 and 1993. There's actually a popular legend, and you may know about, the Boston Red Sox curse, all the Cubs, different superstitions and stuff, but I had not heard of this before. So there is a popular legend called the Curse of Rocky Colavito that says in 1960, when the team traded Colavito, he was the American League's leading home run hitter. They traded him to the Detroit Tigers for Harvey Kuhn, who led the major leagues in batting average. So they traded like power for average. And that actually happened in 1959, that trade happened. So it is said that, then in 1960, they had that long stretch, and that was the beginning of the end of the downward spiral of the curse of Rocky Colavito. Who knows? Could have been. Under manager Mark Mike Hargrove, then the Indians rose from mediocrity to win 5 straight American League Central Division titles from 1995 to 1999. They're back, baby. In 1997, let's talk about this season for a minute. Cleveland started slow, but they ended up finishing with an 86-75 record. So they took their 3rd consecutive American League Central title, and they defeated the New York Yankees in the DS 3-2. They defeated the Orioles in the CS, and then they go on to face the Florida Marlins in the World Series that featured the coldest game in World Series history. That must have been in Cleveland and not in Miami. With the series tied after Game 6, the Indians went into the 9th inning of Game 7 with a 2-1 lead, but their closer, Jose Mesa, allowed the Marlins to tie the game. In the 11th inning, Cardinals legend Edgar Renteria, who was then of the Marlins, drove in the winning run, giving the Marlins their first championship. Cleveland became the first team to lose the World Series after carrying the lead into the 9th inning of a 7th game. Woof. That's rough. I'm sure there's plenty of Indians/Guardians fans out there who remember it well. So during these years of Indians baseball history, we see the greats that you might know if you are at all familiar with Cleveland baseball. Manny Ramirez, Omar Vizquel, and Jim Thome, among others on these teams. They also opened a new ballpark, Jacobs Field, in 1994. So they got the superstars, they got the successful team, and they got a new ballpark. So they set a record for consecutive sold-out home games with 455 between the 1995 and 2001 seasons. This has since been broken by none other than the Boston Red Sox, which is kind of interesting. I feel like the Cardinals should probably really get on that. We need to sell out some more home games. Unfortunately, Cleveland posted just 2 winning records from 2002 to 2012. But in 2013, the Terry Francona era begins. The Indians bring in Terry Francona. They added 24 wins to their total from the previous season, won 24 games more than they did in 2012. Bam. Terry's here. We're going for it. They made a surprising trip to the postseason where they did lose in a 1-game wildcard playoff. In 2016, they overcame a number of odds, all kinds of injuries, and won their division. And this is where we, as baseball fans, were all in awe of Francona's ability to manage and manipulate that roster. That certainly did not seem like they would be a serious World Series contender. But in 2016, the Cleveland Indians lost just 1 game during the American League playoffs, and they made it to the World Series, where they did ultimately lose in a dramatic 7-game series to none other than the Chicago Cubs. On September 13th, 2017, the Indians won their 21st game in a row for the longest winning streak in American League history. That surpassed the mark set by the Oakland Athletics in 2002. This tied them with the 1880 Chicago White Stockings and the 1935 Chicago Cubs for the second longest winning streak in Major League Baseball history. Their win streak reached 22 games on September 14th of 2017, giving the Indians the second longest winning streak in Major League Baseball history. That is still held to this day. They were 4 games short of tying the Major League record of 26 straight wins, which is still held by the 1916 New York Giants. Cleveland won another division title that season in 2017, but they were eliminated in the first round of postseason play. And this is kind of becoming a narrative. Get into the postseason, not sticking around for too long. This is when we see veteran infielder Jose Ramirez really emerge. He hits 39 home runs and stole 34 bases. He led the Indians to a 3rd consecutive division title in 2018, but they once again lost in their first series of the postseason. On January 29, 2018, Major League Baseball announced that Chief Wahoo, who was the mascot of the Cleveland Indians, would be removed from the Indians uniforms as of the 2019 season, stating that the logo was no longer appropriate for on-the-field use. This is another example. We kind of talked about this with the Braves, and we've talked about the cultural appropriation conversation in other episodes, but I would have liked to find, and I did a little bit of digging, some more some different language around why it was removed from the uniforms rather than just saying it is no longer appropriate for on the field use. Sure, that's true. I'm totally agreeing with it, but explain it to us, educate us as people, because it's a way better look as an organization to validate your decision, and it's also it's opening up the conversation, and that's something that we all just need to be better at, but especially these major organizations that are, taking enough initiative to make big changes and then just not really communicating it well. So the block letter C for the Guardians was, or for still the Indians at this time, was promoted to the primary logo at the time. And at this point in time, in 2018, there were no plans to change the team's name. In 2019, Cleveland's 3-year postseason streak came to an end with a second place divisional finish that was good for a wild card spot in the playoffs. And they did end up losing, again, right away to the New York Yankees in the wild card series. So in 2020, we know all kinds of crazy stuff starts to happen in the world, but the protest over the murder of George Floyd, who was, of course, a black man who was killed by the Minneapolis police officer, led the owner of the Guardians to reconsider the use of the Indians' name. Interesting that I was able to find an article that mentioned that specifically kind of sparked him revisiting it. Okay. So on July 3rd of 2020, and this was right on the heels of the Washington Redskins, the football team, announcing that they would undergo a thorough review of their team's name, the Indians announced that they would determine the best path forward, end quote, regarding the team's name, and they emphasized the need to keep improving as an organization on issues of social justice. So on December 13th of 2020, it was reported that the Indians' name would be dropped after the 2021 season. I also think it's kind of interesting that they were like, it's December of 2020. We're going to use the name for one more season, and then we'll revisit it. But they did it. So, okay. So it had been hinted by the team that they may move forward without a replacement name, kind of similar to the Washington football team. It ended up being announced on Twitter on July 23rd of 2021 that the team will be named the Guardians after the Guardians of Traffic, which are 8 large Art Deco statues on the Hope Memorial Bridge located close to Progressive Field, downtown Cleveland. The club, however, found itself in a little trademark dispute with a men's roller derby team that have been called the Cleveland Guardians since 2016. So they were like, excuse me, Major League Baseball, who do you think you are, Major League Baseball? I guess in addition, there were actually 2 other entities who attempted to preempt the team's use of the trademark by filing their own registrations with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The roller derby team filed a federal lawsuit in the U.S. District Court of Northern District of Ohio. My sister-in-law works for the courts in Ohio. Maybe I should ask her if she has any insight on this court case. But on October 27th, 2021, they seeked to block the baseball team from changing its name. I do remember this happening because my husband is from Cleveland and we were anticipating the name change. And then it was like, wait, they announced this already, and is it going to happen? It did. They were ultimately allowed to use the Guardian's name, and the lawsuit was resolved somehow. Maybe they got some money. The name was changed from the Indians to the Guardians, and that became official on November 19th, 2021. Great news is that in their first season as the Guardians, the Major League Baseball's youngest team this season, the Guardians won the 2022 American League Central Division, marking their 11th division title in franchise history. In a best of 3 now wild card series, the Guardians won the series against the Tampa Bay Rays. They advanced to the division series. And in this division series, they played really hard and fast against a great New York Yankees team, but they did ultimately lose in that division series round. So that was their latest postseason run. So in June of 2022, sports investor David Blitzer bought a 25% stake in the Cleveland Guardians franchise with an option to acquire controlling interest in 2028. This is initially what we thought was going down with the sale of the Baltimore Orioles, which is, happening right now. It is yet to be approved by Major League Baseball, but is expected to soon, because David Rubenstein, who will ultimately be the new owner of the Baltimore Orioles, will have 40% stake initially until the passing of Peter Angelos, who is currently the owner. And that's all for tax and money purposes. But it's kind of weird thinking like he might not be the control person, and that we're waiting on someone's passing, which is just like never a situation. And that is not the situation with David Blitzer and him taking controlling interest in 2028. So initially, I just bring it up because that's kind of what was talked about and what we thought might be happening around the sale of the Baltimore Orioles. But it is ultimately a different thing. David Rubenstein is going to be the control person upon the approval of the sale, even though he will only technically own 40%, whereas David Blitzer is not currently the control person. He will acquire controlling interest in 2028. And that will be interesting. I bring it up because it will be interesting to see the way that things evolve. And there's always, some changes that come with a change in ownership and a change in a control person for a team. So that's on the horizon for the Cleveland Guardians in 2028. Terry Francona, you may have heard, retired at the end of the 2023 season. So he was with the Guardians for the last 10 seasons. And the Guardians have now named Stephen Vogt as their new manager, former Major League catcher. The team has played in 4 stadiums since 1890, which is kind of crazy. I don't know, like that just seems like such a long period of time. 4 stadiums doesn't really seem like that many. They played in League Park from 1890 to 1931. This was originally home of the Cleveland Spiders, which we talked about. And Cy Young pitched the first game ever in League Park in 1891. They then played in Cleveland Stadium from 1932 to 1993, and that was between the lake and downtown Cleveland. This stadium was the host of 4 All-Star games and 5 World Series. They played at Jacobs Field that we talked about earlier from 1994 to 2007, which was downtown Cleveland. And they now play at Progressive Field, where they have been since 2007. And that is also in downtown Cleveland in the exact same spot that Jacobs Field was in prior. The minor league affiliates for the Cleveland Guardians: Single A, Lynchburg Hillcats in Lynchburg, Virginia. Their High A team is the Lake County Captains in East Lake, Ohio, which is just outside of Cleveland. Their Double A team is the Akron Rubber Ducks, which I actually found out the Rubber Ducks are named after, I think it is specifically Goodyear tire, but I guess the tire industry is really big in Akron. So that is what the Rubber Ducks are named after. And the Triple A team is the Columbus Clippers in Columbus, Ohio, which again, I mentioned is just a couple hours south of Cleveland. So we talked about with a list there how the minor league teams are, besides their Single A team out in Virginia, all relatively close within a comfortable driving distance that you could go, see the players. And it just makes it easier to be more invested in the up and coming and the development of the organization as a fan, if you want to get into that. So I think that's a kind of a cool feature of the Cleveland Guardians franchise. Well, we are going to put a pin on this Cleveland Guardians feature episode and wrap things up with Quincy Wheeler, who is a writer and podcaster covering the Cleveland Guardians. So let's hear from Quincy and bring it home. It is Cleveland Guardians week here at Peace, Love, and Baseball, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Quincy Wheeler, who writes for Covering the Corner and covers the Guardians on the Guardians Fancast podcast. Quincy, thanks so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kelsey. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for joining me to let us in on your love of the Guardians and just give us that insight that we can really only get from someone who is immersed in Cleveland Guardians culture. So first, tell us, how did you start covering the Cleveland Guardians?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny to read that phrase or hear that phrase of covering the Guardians, because I still kind of just think of myself as a fan who just wants to try to connect other fans to the team better. And so Sports Nation is kind enough to say, hey, would you like to write for our blog? And I started I started on that path probably 2016. I started blogging on the site that I currently work for, which was currently called Let's Go Tribe at the time. So I would do fan posts and I would make comments and so forth. And eventually, a year ago or so, they had an opening for a writer job, and I applied and I got the job. So that's kind of how I ended up there.
Amazing. Was writing something that you did before, or was it just kind of a skill that you found that you had as you got into it, expressing your love for the Guardians?
Oh yeah, good question. I was an English lit minor and
Okay, cool.
communications major, so my day job is as a pastor, so I do some writing for that. And over the years, just writing is something I enjoy doing, writing and reading. So it's been part of my life from the time I guess I could pick up a pen and spell things.
Do you like writing or podcasting better, or is it like one and the same for you?
Yeah, I like writing better, but I do enjoy podcasting too. The nice thing about podcasting is like today you and I can talk, and it's great to like hear from other baseball fans, hear from other Guardians fans, and get that back and forth. But I think I probably enjoy writing more.
Gotcha. Maybe comes a little more naturally to you. You got into that first, and then that took you into podcasting?
Yeah, well, I technically, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because I've been writing about baseball since I first started loving baseball. Don't know if anybody really read what I wrote for the most part, but I had my own little blog for a while. So yeah, it was a while before I decided that, hey, I'm a 30-something-year-old white male. I should have a podcast. But every one of us does. But yeah, usually my podcast I just use as a chance to talk to other fans, which I do love. It's just a different sort of thing. I think the thing about writing that makes it better on me is I guess I just get a particular joy from it, but I also can find the time a little more easily. The problem, of course, is trying to find the time to connect with the people that you care for and you want to connect with, and that can be complicated. So
For sure. Well, tell us something that you have found that is particularly appealing about the Guardians franchise to you that maybe sets them apart from other teams in baseball.
yeah, this is a really great question, and I look forward to kind of going and hearing what other fan bases said about it. I would say that a lot of teams probably talk about wanting to be a family oriented organization. So that is something that the Guardians talk about a lot. And I do think that they try to make specific efforts to make the organization and those who work for them family oriented, to kind of be there for different families and to encourage players and coaches to involve their families and get their families around the game, and try to encourage that atmosphere for families that come to the game and interactions with players. I think that the Guardians Guards Fest that they do, where you get to meet players and you guys sign up for autographs if you want, I think they do a great job of trying to make sure fans really have access to players. And all that isn't to say that they're perfect about all that. There have been some growing edges over the years. They employed, Mickey Callaway and Trevor Bauer, not great people, but it's one of those things that happens over the years. I'm sure you employ somebody like, that didn't turn out too well. I think as an organization, they do try to focus on trying to make things family oriented. So that's the thing for me. In my job and in my connections, I see people that have been Guardians fans their whole life, and we're getting to the point, sadly, where a lot of them will come to the end of their life and not seeing a World Series, but their fire and passion for the team doesn't change. And it's because baseball, at least in Cleveland and probably throughout the world, is about family and the connections that you make with your family while you're at the game, while you're watching the game. It's an everyday thing, just like your family. So I think the team does a pretty good job doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more that that's like such a huge part of it for most fans. And I have heard that actually from, shout out to our listener, John, and friend of the show, he's actually a Cincinnati Reds fan, but he lives in the Cleveland area. And he has told me how family friendly just Progressive Field is, and how he actually likes going there over a number of other ballparks because of the atmosphere and the way that they make it so welcoming for families. So you are not the first person I have heard that from.
Oh,
And it's very cool that it seems like they promote that not only for their fans, but from what you're saying, on the field for the players as well. And let me ask you this, because from the outside looking in, I feel like the Guardians are one of those teams that, yes, they've had their successes, obviously not the ultimate success of a World Series since 1948, but they've had some years where they're going to be competitive. They're going to be really good. fans are excited about that. But even in the years that they aren't, like last year, for example, it feels like the culture around the team and in the clubhouse, in the dugout, is still really good. Does it read that way to you? And do you think that's, a testament to leadership or just the culture around the organization?
Yeah, I think you're correct about that. A lot of it probably has to do with the past 11 years having Terry Francona as manager, because I think even like when culture wasn't good for him in Boston, it wasn't because the players didn't love him. It was the players weren't performing. And then people start to say, oh, are you a little bit too lax with players? And so
Sure.
I think almost any player is going to tell you that having Tito as a manager creates a pretty good culture, and that he tries to make sure that players feel supported and seen, and that they have an ear to hear and somebody that they can connect with. And he always emphasized that everybody had a voice and a seat at the table. So again, not that he was always perfect on that, but I do think that that's been a big part of it for the Guardians over the past few years. So yeah, I mean, obviously last year was frustrating. You could see players getting frustrated. I think you could even see times where maybe it was just like going through the motions. Not that they weren't trying, but it just, no matter what, it just felt that way. But I think that his presence there was able to keep the team from getting to the point of a culture low or a division in the clubhouse kind of thing.
Yeah, it's neat when those sort of things really seem to make a difference and you can notice it from the outside looking in, even from my perspective of, another fan base.
Yeah.
Well, obviously the Guardians is a very young, exciting team right now. Is there a current player in the Guardians system that you are excited about that fans of other teams might not have on their radar?
Yeah, this was a great question for me to think about. I had a few names on my mind, but I'm trying to stick to picking one like you asked for here. And I think I will choose Angel Martinez, who just got a little taste of AAA last season, but spent most of the year in AA. He's a guy who was kind of hanging around the edges of top 100 lists, but probably isn't so much now because he didn't have such a great season hitting wise. But he's a second base, shortstop, third baseman type. He's a switch hitter. He's only 22 years old, just turned 22 last week, and he's already spent some time in AAA, so he's a little bit ahead of where he's supposed to be age wise. The thing that I would say that people could look at Martinez, he had a little bit of a down year last year, and it started off really rough for him, and he kind of had to pull things around, which can happen for a young player. But he did show that he was able to hit for some power and get some walks around 11%, 12% in AA. And the thing with Martinez is that he tends to have a pretty healthy walk rate in that 9 to 12% range. He isn't going to strike out at that 20% range. So it's more like, 17, 19% strikeout rate. So it tells you he's got pretty good plate discipline. He doesn't have a lot of swinging strikes. So he's not, necessarily a guy who chases all the time. And when he makes contact, it's pretty good contact. The thing that he does well that I really like is that he hits the ball in the air quite a bit and he pulls the ball. And one of the things to know about the Guardians is that they tend to try to find value in international free agency and the draft by finding guys who are good defensively, maybe they're shortstops, maybe they're second center fielders, and guys who can pull the ball in the air. Because even if you're not like, a guy who's going to hit 30 homers just automatically stepping out of the gate because you're built like a semi truck, if you can pull the ball in the air, you can get more balls out than you probably should physique or power hitting tool wise. So Angel Martinez has a good amount of that. And he's also a guy who plays pretty good defense. I think he probably ends up at second base or third base.
Okay.
Or the outfield. He's been spending a little time in the outfield. Maybe he ends up in left field. But he also has shown the ability to hit lefties and righties pretty well as a switch hitter. So that's a guy that I would keep my eye on. Either the Guardians will find a place for him or they might trade him to a team who will really like him. But I do think he's going to be a successful major leaguer one of these days.
Nice. You think we could see him in the majors as early as this year or more like next year?
Yeah, I do think that they'll probably, if he's still in Cleveland, if they don't trade him to somebody who's looking for that kind of player, I do think that we'll see him in Cleveland at some point. He may be playing outfield when he comes up But yeah, I do think they'll see him because he's been on the 40-man roster now for a full year. This will be his second year on the 40-man roster. So you kind of have to get a chance to take a look at him, especially if he comes out strong and shows that he's capable of it. You know, he's got 2 more options left, so you're wasting a whole option year this year. So probably we will see him in Cleveland at least a little bit.
All right. That was a good one. I'm excited to keep my eye on him personally.
Yeah, and I'll just mention I've met him too, and he seems like a really great guy. He was kind to my son as my son was going through line. My son's 4 years old, and he was excited to get players' autographs, and he was real kind to him. So I think he's a good guy to follow.
That's awesome. That always deserves a shout out. Well, let's go to kind of dreamland here for a minute, because I want to know if you could pick one player who is currently in Major League Baseball, who is not on the Guardians, that you think just fits into the culture. Try to take it out of your mind. It doesn't need to fill a particular need for the team currently, but just somebody who you're like, that guy should be a Cleveland Guardian. He would fit in really well here. Who would you pick?
The one clarification that I just thought of asking, were you thinking here just anybody, or am I thinking of people who are more like potentially available?
No, you could literally be like, I want Bryce Harper to be on the Guardians.
Yeah,
like
well, and who doesn't want that? Yeah,
Right.
He's a great guy to have. I think I'm glad I was thinking about it, right? Because I think that you would find, if you search Spencer Strider and Guardians, you'd find a lot of Guardians fans saying that they'd like Spencer Strider. He's an Ohio guy. He's a guy that I don't know. He's just kind of quirky, and Guardians fans love quirkiness. They also have a fair amount of guys on the Guardians who are quirky. So he seems like he connects pretty well with the younger fan base. Obviously, insanely talented pitcher. Guardians have been kind of a pitching factory. So I feel like if Spencer Strider were on the Guardians, nobody would blink an eye. They'd be like, oh, yeah, that seems like a Guardians type and the kind of guy we expect them to produce.
That does seem like it just fits. And I like the kind of mutual appreciation there. Like, he would appreciate being there. The fan base would appreciate him.
Any fan base would appreciate him. It seems like
that's true.
He's something else, but yeah, no, I know what you mean. They would have a special affection for him, I think.
Yeah. Okay, this might be a bit of a challenge, because I'm sure there's dozens of reasons that you could give for why you are a Guardians fan and why you would encourage anybody to be a Guardians fan. But we have a lot of overseas listeners, people who are maybe just getting into baseball. They haven't declared a specific fandom yet. So here is your chance to kind of pitch it to a new baseball fan. What are your top 3 reasons to be a Guardians fan?
Yes, I love this question. And so I'll try to make it as persuasive as possible. I think that the first reason that we definitely shouldn't ignore or skip over is that the Guardians are the team of Jose Ramirez, and Jose Ramirez is all that is good and joyful about baseball. From the fact that if you walked past you on the street and he had his arms covered up, which that's the thing for me, like any hitter, if a baseball hitter walks by, you're probably going to recognize that they're a hitter because they all have Popeye arms. But if Jose Ramirez is wearing long sleeves and you didn't know who he was, you wouldn't expect that he's a baseball player, because he's 5'7", 5'8", kind of pudgy build, and yet just an incredible hitter and a great defender and one of the best baseball players that we've seen in a long time. Since his debut, he's the only player in baseball with 200 homers and 200 steals. When he's been, completely healthy and in a good lineup, he's a guy who's putting up 7 or 8 wins a year, kind of thinking about wins above replacement. And he's just an incredible joy to be around, to see on the field. He's always joking with his teammates, joking with other guys, and he gives 100% every time. That's the thing. And I think when someday they give Jose Ramirez Hall of Fame speeches and so forth, so I do think that he'll find himself in the Hall of Fame eventually. One thing that they'll mention is that there's been very few base runners smarter than Jose Ramirez. And if you watch Guardians games, just give yourself a second to pay attention to how quickly Jose Ramirez picks up things in the field, when he's on the bases, because he will see a small glance, a small gesture, and he'll take an extra base just based on that. And there's so many great examples. Last year, he stole home off of Aroldis Chapman. And famously, in the Guardians' 22-game win and their 22-game win streak, he took second on something that nobody ever should take second. But he saw just something very, very small in the right fielder's eye, and he took second base. And that's the kind of thing he does all the time. So Jose Ramirez, he's a joy. He's a treasure. He's in Cleveland for probably the rest of his career. And we're so thankful for that as Cleveland fans. Finally, a beloved superstar staying, even though he had to take a huge discount to do it. We love him. He loves Cleveland. Don't know. It's one of those things. It's like he just talks about how much he loves Cleveland. And it's like there's few people that will say that about Cleveland. So we love him. We adore him. You mentioned that the team is young. I think that's an appealing thing. You have a lot of young players with a lot of team control. So if you watch this team, you're going to see guys who will be here for a while. That's not to say that the Guardians are going to keep all their players, obviously. They extended Jose Ramirez. They extended Andres Jimenez, and that's great. But a lot of times they end up trading guys towards the end of their time before they hit free agency. But there's a lot of young guys right now who are going to be with the team for a while, a lot of young guys who have the potential to break out. Even though this last year was kind of disappointing in that, the year before was super exciting. I expect this next year will be somewhere a little bit in the middle, but we'll get to see some young guys really step up and show that they're the next kind of stars, at least on a local level, maybe some on a national level of the Guardians, who will help the team in the future. And so there are a lot of fun young guys to pay attention to. And then the third reason, if I were somebody who was trying to decide what team to follow and what team to root for, you have two choices. Basically, you can decide, I want to root for a team that has a lot of resources, a lot of success, and is going to give me a good chance at seeing a World Series championship. Now, the Guardians have at least one of those things. They've had a lot of success over the past 15 years or so, maybe a little bit less. They have the fourth most wins in all of baseball. They have a lot of wins. Since Terry Francona came along, they have the fourth most wins in all of baseball. So in the past 15 years, it's like seventh most wins. So they've been very successful in the regular season. They've won a pennant in that time. They've made they had the most Central Division titles of any team in the Central Division, AL Central. So they've been successful. They don't have a World Series title since 1948, and the ownership doesn't spend a lot on the team. Ownership's changing. Maybe that'll change, but I kind of doubt it. So I think the thing that I would encourage a new fan to say is that part of what it means to be a baseball fan is to learn how to deal with heartbreak and learn how to deal with disappointment and learn how to deal with the fact that baseball is an ongoing story, that every year is another chapter of it. And you're always hoping for that joy of experiencing that final victory of the season. But every year is something different. And it's this soap opera that's developing in front of you. And so I think that the Guardians give you that shot just about as well as any other team in baseball. And if you like this team, you're going to be part of the people who right now have been waiting longer than any other fan base to see a World Series title. But unlike some other places where you're like, I don't know if that's ever going to happen because we're incompetent or we don't care, the Guardians do care, and they're not incompetent. They've been successful. So there's that hope. There's that joy in it, while you also get that struggle and heartbreak. And I think that's what baseball is all about.
Oh, that was a beautiful final reason. I mean, they were all good reasons, but you hit the nail on the head, because the Guardians' time is coming. Like, it's actually weird to think that they haven't won a World Series in so long, because they just don't have the vibe of like the Cubs or those other teams, who were just waiting forever.
I don't know if you, like, I was going to say, I don't know if you saw, just sorry to interrupt, there's I forget who did it. If it was Baseball Prospectus, I think it was, put out an article of expected championships. And I think over the past 100 years, I forget what the time frame was, but I know the Guardians were leading. The Guardians, by all statistics of the performances of their team, should have like 3 World Series in the past 75 years. So,
oh my gosh,
they've been successful. They just haven't, it's a lot of luck to it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they've had like all the right things except for that luck on their side. And one of these days they're gonna luck out.
Hope so.
Well, we'll hope for it for you and, for the rest of the Guardians fan base. But tell us where we can keep up with you and your coverage of the Guardians on social media.
Yeah, thanks for asking. You can find me at Quincy Wheeler 1, Quincy with no E before the Y, QUINCY, Wheeler 1 on Twitter. My podcast account will get active here again. I'm going to start it up here as we get closer to the season. But that's a Guardian Fancast and the Cleveland Guardians Fancast. I also appear on the podcast associated with Covering the Corner, which is Disgusting Baseball Podcast. So if you search for Disgusting Baseball Podcast or you search for Guardian Fancast, you can find the podcast there. And then, like you said about Covering the Corner, if you go to coveringthecorner.com, you can read about Guardians baseball stuff. And I do think there's probably some stuff there that we put out that'll be interesting to other teams as well. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today and for taking a little time out to chat all things Cleveland Guardians. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Quincy Analyst for joining me today for our Cleveland Guardians feature on Peace, Love, and Baseball. Hit up their social media info and following in the show notes. And make sure that you are following me at Kbird Tweets on Twitter. Make sure that you're subscribed wherever you're listening or watching this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, got to hit that subscribe button. Got to hit the little bell so you get notified every Tuesday when there is a brand new fresh episode for you. And if you are listening on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcast, just make sure that you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss what's coming next. If you feel so inclined to leave a comment, maybe contribute to the conversation, feel free to make some suggestions or leave a rating or review if you feel so inclined to support the show that way. You can also send it to a friend because word of mouth, making a recommendation of something that you love to share with someone is the best way to get the word out. And I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you again, talking to you again next week on Peace, Love, and Baseball.